All right, we're live. Not really live. I keep doing that. Sorry, everybody. We are here with another episode of the Proof 3 podcast. Today we got Coach Adam here. We're going to, as the title would suggest, talk about some warm-ups and cool-downs. Should you be doing them? Should you not be doing them? What is a warm-up and what is a cool-down? Because I think the language is important around it, because some people might think they're warming up or think they're cooling down when they really are doing way too much and it's just training, or they're doing nothing and maybe that's fine. But yeah, I want to get right into it. I want to keep it short and sweet and give the people what they want. What is a warm up to you and what is a cool down to you? And maybe like what people traditionally would think of warming up. I'm just going to maybe get on a bike or walk or jog for 5 minutes and I'll start training. And a cool down, they might just think I'm going to hit some static stretches. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I love that you started with this question, because I think this is like, we could talk about this for the whole podcast. Like, what is the warm up and how do you dissociate a warm up from training? And I think a lot of people in their mind, they do dissociate the two. They're two different things. The way that I view it, there is a very brief period where you're getting your body, you could say like increasing your core temperature. I think that's what a lot of people would say, but you're getting your body up to the point to be able to train hard. That is considered your warm up. And then everything else you can consider your training. I don't, when I view my own training or my clients' training, to me, if we're taking that 5 to 10 minute time frame and we're not utilizing it well, these people only have 45 to 60 minutes to train. Some only 3 days a week. We'll say some obviously 5 days per week and some in between, but that's a big chunk of time if I'm taking 10 minutes every single day to do something that's not valuable for them. So I want to try to fill that time with things that are going to warm up their body for, the things that are coming up in the training, but I still want to view that 5 to 10 minutes as a part of their training, just like their back squats, their lunges, their, metcons, whatever they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, maybe I'm wasting some clients' times too, but I usually try, and when I'm thinking of warm up, I have like warm up or in prep in my head. And when I'm looking at a client, sometimes it's pretty general, but I'm trying to obviously prep them for what's next. And a lot of stuff that I might consider like homework or little small things I want people to be doing, like maybe an overhead carry, and it can be heavy, but it might be first, because it's like, hey, this will warm them up for the press. And then I'm also doing some straight arm overhead activities that I wanted them to be doing. So would you just consider that training?
Totally.
And
totally.
not warming up, or both, in the language is just, like going to go either way?
Yeah, I think the language or the label is what screws it up for most people. And I know people that think they just need to do a warm up because a lot of people have told them they need to do a warm up. But again, like to your point, you do an overhead carry, that is training. Like I would program that in someone's strength component accessory part of their training, right? Like, or I can put it at the warm up because it's a high priority for them. I think that's another big part of like the warm up, or as most people think of it as the warm up, is the first thing that you're going to do in the training day. So you're generally most mentally acute at that time frame. So I want to do something that's really valuable for them while they're super acute. So I'll speak to my clients and myself, like flexibility and mobility is a big part of the way that I train. It's a big part of like what clients are coming to me for. And so I use that 5 to 10 minutes to work on their biggest limitations in their mobility and flexibility. And what's great is, hey, it also warms up their body to be able to back squat and get into the positions that they need to in order to do the movements that are going to follow. But those same exercises that I'm prescribing in that 5 to 10 minutes, like I would prescribe that as just a training day, like that is training to me. And so I do think the label of warm up screws up a lot of people. Like it's like, oh, I need to just do this thing. I need to just check this box to get onto the thing that's more important. And so I end up doing like 5 to 10 minutes of things that aren't really providing me any stimulus at all, other than increasing my core temperature. So why would I not use that time to increase my core temperature still, but do things that are very useful for me, things that are they have some means of progression. They're pointed to some sort of outcome or some sort of goal. Like right before we started, we were talking about the front split. Like, hey, someone wants to get the front split, or I think chasing the front split for them would be really, really valuable. I might include some exercises for the front split. It's attached to this outcome. So they're trying to get better at it over time. And what's also great is now they're super prepped for their first exercise that they have right after. It's like, hey, they're going to do some sort of lower body training. So their core temperature is up now from working on these drills. They're able to get into the positions of squat or Bulgarian split squat, whatever they're going to do first in their training. And so I've, like killed two birds with one stone sort of thing. I'm just like, I want to use that time as best as possible, as I want to use all time in their training as best as possible. Like they only have so much energy and so much time per week to put into training. And so I want to make sure every minute is valuable. And so I think where I get like fed up with the traditional warm up is like, hey, do 30 clamshells on each side, and then like do this like lateral band walk, and then do this like the plank exercise. Like those things aren't bad, and they can be the right thing if that's exactly what that person needs. But if it's such a low stimulus for this individual, you're not making any positive change. All you are doing is increasing their core temperature, which again we want to do, but not at the expense of wasting that valuable time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're challenging me already. I'm liking it. All right. So, and then depending on different goals or different groups of people, that could change a little bit by degree. Maybe, maybe if it's someone who might be training for, let's say 2 hours, it might be a little more competitive based, or, they have some serious performance goals and they're training really hard all the time, where like a lighter warm up might actually be necessary, like something a little more traditional. And it might be like they have the 20 minutes, so they might really have to do that. I'm thinking maybe someone with like a 10-year training age, they're a little, they're a little older, they're tighter, but they're still, pushing their performance. Would you change it slightly for someone like that?
Potentially, if there was a specific goal that like, hey, they have to be able to actually, I don't even know if I would change the argument even in that scenario. Like
oh, I didn't mean like change the whole thing, but I'm saying would it like, so Nate, now you have 20 minutes. Would it be beneficial for them to be like, all right, we're gonna do a little more of like joint mobility that this X person's not doing before, leading into something else, and then the session starts? Or do you still think that or is that just like a general training problem overall? Like maybe there's something else we need to focus on. I'm just imagining like a 10-year power lifter, and they're, like they're not getting into depth until they're, got 400 pounds on their back. Like, is that just the way it needs to go? Or,
Yeah. So the way that I would look at that is, okay, let's use the example you just gave, the power lifter. They have trouble getting to depth. That's a problem for them. In competition, they have to hit a certain depth. They're not able to hit that depth often, or they struggle with it. And it takes them a lot of sets to get to that point. For that individual, the goal is I need to get them more mobility to be able to get that depth consistently. And I would think my logic would say like the more reps that they accumulate in that depth, the stronger they're going to be in that depth, the more normal or natural that depth is going to be for them. So they're likely going to hit that every time when they're performing in a competition. So what I'm doing to prep for those squats is working on the things that are allowing them to do that. So I'm still attaching what is in that 5 to 10 minutes, or let's say even 20 minutes, to a specific goal. And I think that maybe that's like kind of what I'm getting at, or what we're getting at, is that just don't waste that time. So even in that powerlifting example, like, hey, you're going to spend 20 minutes to work on your mobility and get into the positions needed so that every rep of your squat is to full depth, so that when you get to competition, you achieve full depth without even like work. Like it's never a problem for you, never get red lighted in that scenario. Well, we're using that time really, really wisely, because their big weakness right now is that they can't achieve depth. And so, yes, we can continue to get stronger, and that's super valuable for this individual. But if they can't get to depth, well, it doesn't matter how strong they are, they're going to get red lighted and they're not going to make a squat, right? So
yeah,
their weakness or their low hanging fruit is getting into the squat position in and of itself. And so that's what I'm going to spend our 20 minutes on, or our 10 minutes on. It's like improving those positions. And to me, I view that as training. It is also a warm up, which is great, right? In the depth, like take warm up for what it is. We're warming up the body. Like that stuff is also going to warm up the body, which is great. But that is an equally important part of this individual's training, as is the back squat building up to a 3-rep max for the day.
Okay. All right, then. Still on warm-ups, you mentioned, and we were messaging back and forth, the JTLC, which is joint tendon and ligament. Is it cartilage?
Central nervous system is
CNS.
Yeah.
I was thinking. I was just thinking to myself, like, there's no way that's right. I don't know why. So what is that traditional thinking in your mind?
Yeah. This is a good topic. So the JTLC. So the first gym that I started working for it's called Lab Gym in St. Louis. They're still around. Justin Thacker was the person who came up with this warm up JTLC. He used it for a couple different reasons. He used it as an assessment. So first day someone came in to train, this was the first thing that they did. So it acted partly as assessment in the early days. Like, you do all these different motions. You basically go head to toe. You go through the neck, you go through the shoulder, you go through the spine, you go through the hips, through the knees, through the ankles, and you see where there's potential limitation for this individual. So that's already cueing me in on what movements should this person do or shouldn't this person do. But this JTLC essentially acts as like a full body warm up. But the reason I wanted to talk about the JTLC is that it is a very traditional general warm up. Like, someone would look at that and go, "Oh yeah, that's what a warm up is." You know, we're kind of trying to find like what is a warm up and when are we using this label? Like, why are we applying this label? That is something someone would consider a general warm up. But when I look at that, I'm like, wow, this person is accumulating a shit ton of really good reps, and that, like, accumulation of reps on the tissues that they're hitting is adding to their change in physiology and in their musculoskeletal system. Like, those things are changing because of that consistent stimulus that they're giving. I'll give you an example. One of the exercises is a leg swing, right? So, you know, your traditional like forward and back leg swing. Someone would look at that and go, that is a warm up. You know, someone's going to start running on the track. They do that. Someone's about to start soccer practice. They'll do that. That's a traditional warm up exercise. But when I look at that, I'm like, okay, wow, this person's doing 20 leg swings every single day where their hamstring is going through this fast eccentric contraction, and they're accumulating 20 of those every day for 6 months, a year, 2 years. Now they're 10 years into training. Like, their tissue has adapted to that stimulus because of how often they've done that. And if you put the right movements in the general warm up, like, you know, like that, you are changing over time and your tissue is adapting over time. So again, it's like we can even take a general warm up, but as long as the coach or the person doing the training can see how that's making change over time, it's an equally important part of the training process, as is A1 and A2 or B1 and B2. You know what I mean? Like, when we're squatting, we're trying to change our physiology, right? We're trying to get stronger. We're trying to grow more muscle. Well, same idea when we're doing leg swings, like, but the adaptation is something different, right? The adaptation is my hamstring can now lengthen really quickly without it tearing. How great that I've accumulated 500 reps in the last month. You know what I mean?
Okay, so would you what's an example? Someone's going to go for let's just say like a 45-minute easy run. What would the warm up look like, if, you know, maybe just generally speaking, if this might be different from a lot of the listeners, like what they're doing or what they think they should be doing? What would consist of the warm up? Or I don't even know if warm is the right word now, but like what would pre-training, pre-run movement A and B, like what would you have people doing? And it could be anyone. I know obviously left, you know, one person could be on one left side of the spectrum, the other person could be on the right side. So
totally. It's definitely sorry, I'm keep fixing my ear pods just because this ear is all messed up from jiu-jitsu. So I always have problems with this one. So if you see me keep doing that. So it highly depends on the individual. And this is exactly what I want people to start making the connection with. If let's say I have a couple different running clients. I have, a client who has been running consistently for 10 years, has rarely had any sort of like musculoskeletal issue associated with running. She has a very like natural gait. For that person, I would say, hey, go jog for 5 to 10 minutes until you feel like you got a little bit of sweat, you're breathing a little bit heavy, then maybe rest, walk for a couple minutes, and then start your 45-minute run. That person doesn't need to do any general prep other than just getting their core temperature up, so that when they start their like 45-minute run or their like time trial, they can work up to the pace that they need to be at, right?
Mm-hmm.
For someone who, I have another client, she consistently has like Achilles and calf problems. She's pretty new to running. And so for her, I might have her do a ton of Achilles and prep and footwork. So I might do like toe sits, heel sits, different like foot stability exercises. But the way that I view it is I'm using that to get her better at the thing that she's weak at. And what's nice is it also preps her for her run. And then she goes on a run. You know what I mean? So, and then same, another common scenario, I see a lot of runners, they will do like glute med exercises. It's a really common one, right? It's like, if you activate your glute med is what people will say, like your gait is going to be better, or your knee's not going to collapse, or whatever they're trying to accomplish with that. If I can see, hey, you really do have a really like a glute weakness, you have a ton of knee valgus on everything that you do. When you are running, there's a huge amount of overpronation in knee valgus. Yeah, like I might have them start with some sort of lateral band walk so that they can just feel their glutes before they start running. And then maybe they'll start running with a little better mechanics because of that. But again, I'm addressing that exercise to what their weakness is. I'm not just prescribing a lateral band walk because I saw some other PT do that before some other runners program. Yeah. And that's what I see all the time. Like I'll go and see like, so I have people that will like show me a warm up. They're like, is this a good warm up? And I'm like, well, what's the context? Like, what are you trying to improve with the individual? Like if you're just doing lateral band walks before every run because some PT said to do that, well, then I think it's a terrible warm up. But if that person really, that's a weakness for them and that's going to improve their performance and improve their gait mechanics, minimize injuries, then it's a great warm up for them. And more so, it's great training for them because we're working on the things that they're bad at.
Okay. So let's wrap that up. Don't waste that time.
Yes.
Part one is don't waste the time because you're not going to get it back. And X person listening right now, they're going to go for a 30-minute run. What their warm-up should be is like, what do I need to get better at? Or what are things I want to work on and need to get better at that also could help me, maybe prepare for the run. Like maybe they have, maybe their hips are weak, and I'm just being a generalist. My hips are weak and I'm going to use them when I run. So maybe I'll hit some split squats, or maybe I'll do like some isometric holds in a lunge position, or some wall sits and some glute airplanes. So now I'm actually working on my hips and I'm a lot warmer and I'm going to feel better running. So like that would be the approach.
It's a great summary. It's a perfect summary. Okay. I think people might get lost in like, well, I have these 10 weaknesses, like I have all of these problems. I think for most people to narrow in on a couple weaknesses at once is a good thing. Like, hey, you probably have 10 areas that you could improve, but here are the things that are most important to improve. Like, let's prioritize those. And also to your point, like there's going to be things that are more associated with running, and there's going to be things that are more associated with a heavy back squat. And so just use those sessions to work on those weaknesses, right? Like in the powerlifting example, hey, we're going to work on your squat depth. We're going to work on like hip mobility, maybe hip internal rotation, hip flexion in that warm up, in that prep for the squat. And for the run, like, hey, you have these constant calf Achilles issues. Like we're going to do that there, right? I could do my calf Achilles stuff as a warm up for my squat because that is a weakness, but there's not going to be as much translation into the squat. And so I'd rather like put the things or the areas that need to be worked on, the weakness areas, with the things that are associated with those weak areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So if that's resonating with you listeners, but you're like, I can't do that, you can just send us a message and maybe we can help you. Maybe we can do the work for you. All right. So we just did our prep warm up. We just need a new name. We just need a new name.
Honestly, the labeling is the problem. And honestly, I think
I don't want pre-training or
I
I
just
don't
think
know.
it's all training, it's all
Yeah,
training. It's all training.
yeah. Early training movements, ETMs. So we've done that. We did our run, and now it's time for a cool down.
Yeah.
So minute 20, we hit cool down. Flexibility training is something you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
before I don't know if we mentioned it yet on the pod, but before and definitely in some messages. And then another thing you said, which was very intriguing to me, and I think other people will be intrigued with, is preparation for your next training session. So the
Yeah.
cool down, let's just start early. What the cool down? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Same.
The post training movements, the
The post
PTMs.
training, yeah, the
Again,
post training move. Same logic and theory applies in my mind, that this is valuable training time that I don't want to waste. Now, there is some things that are different at the end of the training versus at the beginning of the training. I'm less mentally acute at the end of my training, and my body is very, very warm. So I want to do things that are less mentally taxing, and because my body is warm, this is an excellent time to work on flexibility training. And if you're someone who's super flexible and that's not a weakness of yours, I would say like your cooldown doesn't need to include flexibility training. Your cooldown might be something as simple as like slowing down, hopping on a bike for 2 to 3 minutes. It might be laying on your back, like the static back. That's the classic. Is that an
yeah.
OPEX thing? Static back, or
Oh,
I don't know where
I don't
that
know if
came
static
from.
is, but the 90
But
90, like feet propped up and on a
totally,
box
totally.
breathing.
Yeah, sitting on your back and just breathing slowly, getting your nervous system back into a parasympathetic state or as close to, so that you start the recovery process as soon as possible. Like that might be appropriate for someone that doesn't need to work on any more things within their training. They got a really good training session in, say flexibility is not a problem for them. Hey, do a couple minutes of slowing down your breathing so you can start this recovery process as soon as possible, and then get on with your day. Reality is most people have some sort of flexibility, mobility impairment that could be worked on. And because your tissues are super worn and a lot of static stretching doesn't take a high level of mental acuity, what a great time to include that into the training, right? So it's like that is a great place for a lot of people to do their flexibility training, because it is going to bring them into a parasympathetic state. It doesn't require a lot of thought, and their tissues are super, super warm, right? So I will generally, like, again, this is sort of like my type of clientele that I'm usually working with. They come to me with some sort of past injury, some sort of mobility impairment. I do an assessment on them, identify where these limitations are, and now all of the cool downs that I program are associated with those limitations. Now I'm working on some of those limitations within the training in other places as well, right? Like I might do some stuff that is flexibility training, but requires more mental acuity at the beginning of training, or the, what did you call it, the pre-training movements, or
Early training
early
movements.
training move. Yeah, the early
Mhm.
training movements. We might be working on the same goal, but one requires more mental acuity than the other. And then at the end, it might be something just like static stretching, right? Super simple, low mental acuity. So I think the general principles of cool down, we mentioned general principles of warm up are increase your core temperature. I would say the general principles of cool down are to shift your nervous system from more of a parasympathetic state to more of a sympathetic state to more of a parasympathetic state. And if you do that, like, you've achieved a cool down. But again, if I'm spending 10 minutes on shit that is not advancing me in my training, what a waste of valuable time. So I want to just make sure that whatever I am putting in there, it's going to bring them into a little bit more of a parasympathetic state, and it is still tied to something that they need to improve or that we're looking to make change on.
Okay, so there's no real warm up. We have early training movements that prepare us for the movements, but now so essentially your back squats are just warming you up for your stretches, is what you're saying. So
100%.
there is
100%.
a warm up, and it's actually just the back squats, the main session
It's
to
the
improve
training.
your. Okay,
Totally. It's
it's
all
just it's
training,
a circle.
it's
It's just
all
a circle.
training.
Everything is a warm
Totally.
up for the next thing you do.
Totally. And to the question you asked earlier, because this ties
Yeah.
in well, it's like, if you are doing stretching at the end of your training session, let's say that's common. That's what most people need to work on. That's what I'm, giving to most of my clients in that like last 5 to 10 minutes of training. it's going to start the recovery process early, which is great. It's also going to set them up really, really well for their next training session. And I would say that is more anecdotal than evidence-based, but you can try it this week, or anybody listening, try it this week. Like, do a handful of static stretches after your training session, see how you feel for the next session, for the start of the next session, versus go a whole week where you don't do any cool downs. You finish your last exercise that's programmed, and then you just move on with your day right away, and then go into training the next day and see how you feel. It's going to be two very, very different things.
Yeah. Don't actually do that. Just trust us.
Yeah. Just trust us. Just actually do the stretching at the end of your training session.
Okay. So the preparation for the next training session, say we just did this person is doing a majority lower body session. Most of their movements and training was revolving around the lower body. Their lower body is warm, but their next session is primarily upper body.
Yeah.
Would you try and include a little bit of upper body work in the cool down or in the post training to prep them for that too? Or would you kind of just stick overall with a lower body?
I would mostly stick with lower body overall, but again, it ties to the individual. Let's say this individual, their biggest limitation is their overhead flexibility, and they're a CrossFit competitor and they need to do shoulder to overhead often. I would put some sort of work in that cool down, even on their lower body day, for their overhead position, because that's like the lowest hanging fruit for that specific individual to get better at their sport. So if I can get more frequency of any particular area, I want to put that in the training if I can, even if it doesn't make like total sense. Let's take that same example. Someone who does a passive hang 6 days a week versus only 2 days a week on their upper body days, the person who does 6 days is going to adapt quicker and probably achieve a better overhead position quicker. And so if I can put that in the end of a training session for a lower body day, great. Like, I just get more touches. And to kind of like tie this into, everything that we're talking about, I'm trying to make some sort of change to my clients or to myself in my own training with everything that I do in the training. And so every single minute that I spend training should be associated with some sort of thing that I'm trying to improve or change. And if it's not, it's probably a waste of time. And I think like I've heard more recently, a lot of people saying like, "Oh, I don't warm up. I just like get into my first exercise and I start doing the exercise that I'm doing. I just do more ramp up sets to get up to my first working set." And I'm like, that's great. Like, if your primary goal is to get bigger lats and your first exercise is a close grip pull down or a lat pull down, great. Just start getting into it, like, because that's most associated with your goal. Now, eventually, if you run into problems where that if you improve your shoulder range of motion, you'll get more range of motion at the lat, or you get more length of lat, therefore it leads to more growth, then it might be valuable for you to do some sort of like length type work at the beginning of your training before you start to get into that exercise. But again, I think, the concept of both how I utilize the early training movements and the late training movements, or the end of training movements, is what are their weaknesses? This is valuable time for them. How can I spend that time most valuably for them?
Okay. So time and weakness and value.
Yeah.
So essentially the warm up and the cool down, everybody, which is non-existent, is really just a different approach to training because of the time, how much time you have and the time and space your body is in because of, core temperature and, looseness or tightness, whichever one it is. Okay. Hopefully that painted a better picture for people. If you had to summarize it, final thoughts of, what you just explained to people, they made it this far, just leave with this advice, what would it be?
I think you summarized it well, and that it's all training. There is a very brief period of time where you want to get your core temperature up. There's a very brief period of time where you probably want to start shifting back into a parasympathetic state, but it's all training time. Use it very, very wisely. In order to use that time wisely, you probably need to do some sort of assessment process on yourself, or like, take note on where are their problems, where are their weak areas, what do I actually need to improve? to continue to get closer to my goal. If my goal is to win a powerlifting competition and squat depth is a limiter for me, okay, like I need to make sure that I'm getting that in somewhere throughout the week. In the beginning or end of training, it may be a good time to include that. In the middle of training, it could be a good time to include it as well. There's really no right or wrong way to do it, so long as, again, it's associated with some sort of item that you're trying to improve or change, and it's associated with the goal that you're trying to achieve or the outcome that you're trying to achieve with your training.
Okay. And then anything just training related you'd like someone to know? Any any advice, anything you stumbled across this week that you're like, man, I forgot about this, or I wish I would have known this? Anything recently that you're ready to put out to people?
I'm always finding new things, but I'll stay roughly on this topic and just reiterate that generally more flexibility, more mobility within, like, again, this is a very generalized statement, but if you move better, this is a better way to say it. If you move better, you will probably be able to train and perform for longer. And being able to train and perform for longer, or train and perform more, you're probably going to get better. Nothing replaces just time, right? Like, time heals all sort of thing. Like, if you just squat for 20 to 30 years, like, you're going to get really freaking strong. And so if you're starting to address these things that potentially hinder you from being able to do that, you're setting yourself up really well for the long run. I think that's another thing, like, people often miss is like, hey, I can squat now, so I'm just going to keep squatting and I'm not going to do anything to improve my squat. But if you were to see, like, hey, I have this really, like, my right hip feels terrible, like, every fourth squat session, okay, there's probably something there. Like, you should probably dive a little bit deeper, see if you can make some improvement, because that's probably going to set you up better in the long run to just keep squatting and keep training for longer. And again, those are the things that are, training for longer is the thing that's going to make you the best athlete possible, regardless of what sport you're performing in.
Good. Awesome. That's good cap. One quick question. How would you improve someone's VO2 max in one session?
In one session? That's a great question.
It was just a joke. That's our endurance homework. I was just trying to cheat on your answer.
No, I haven't done my homework yet. I watched some intense VO2 kinetics videos though this week on YouTube, just like diving in deeper to the physiology. And yeah, I thought I knew a lot about VO2, but turns out there's a lot more to learn. There's always more to learn.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Where can people find you? If you do the social medias, do you put out any good content for people?
I've not been up to date on social media, so the best place to get a hold of me is probably through Proof 3. You can reach me through there, but on social media, if you reach out to me, I'll eventually see it. It might take a few days for me to get back to you, but I'll eventually see it. There's a good catalog of some content there, mostly training videos. So if you just want to see hey, is this guy credible? Like, is he flexible? Is he strong? Like, what the hell does this guy know? Like, you could go on my Instagram and just
certifications is your PR numbers.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Hey, I have some certifications, which is great. So some people give me credibility just for that. But I think what you can do in training or what you've demonstrated yourself, like, that speaks volume in my mind.
Yeah. Lead from the front.
Totally.
Awesome. All right. I'll have the links. I got the links to the website. And you can find them on social media through our Proof 3 account as well. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment. You can send them an email, a message. And if if this was so awesome that you're ready to work with Adam, then, we can probably make it work. We can set it up. Just get in touch with him or me, and I'll plug you guys along. So we appreciate everyone listening. If you have any ideas or topics you'd like to hear him talk about, let us know. And we'll get them rescheduled. So we're excited for the next episode. We already got some plans. They'll be great. But we can always take on some more questions from you. So again, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.